The terminal was buzzing with the kind of restless energy only airports have. People were juggling carry-ons, clutching passports, and glaring at the departure board like it owed them money. Gate B-17 was no different. An endless line of passengers waiting to board a flight that was already 30 minutes late. I'd been here before. Too many times, in fact. I knew the rhythms of airports. The dull announcements, the smell of burnt coffee, the restless tapping of impatient travelers. But today, my eyes weren't on the clock. They were on my boarding pass. Seat 1A. First class, aisle right at the front. A rare moment of comfort before a long flight ahead. At least that's what I thought. Because just as the boarding doors opened and the agent called for priority passengers, I felt the sharp sting of eyes drilling into me from across the gate. And there she was, Karen. Of course, I didn't know her name yet, but everything about her screamed it. The stiff bob haircut, the oversized sunglasses she hadn't taken off indoors, and the HOA tote bag she carried like it was a badge of honor. She strutted toward the line like she owned the entire terminal, lips pursed in disapproval at anyone who dared stand in her way. And unfortunately, her path led straight to me. "Excuse me," she snapped, voice dripping with entitlement. "You're sitting in 1A?" I glanced down at my boarding pass, then back at her. "That's right." Her jaw tightened. "No, that can't be right. That's my seat." Now, there are two kinds of people you meet at airports. The tired, beaten-down travelers who just want to get home, and the ones who think rules don't apply to them. Karen was firmly in the second category. The gate agent scanned my ticket without hesitation. Beep. Green light. "Welcome aboard, sir." But Karen wasn't having it. She practically lunged at the agent, slapping her boarding pass down on the scanner. It blinked red. "Denied." "This is ridiculous," she barked. "I always sit in first class. I'm in 1A. Check again." The agent, clearly used to people like her, forced a professional smile. "Ma'am, your seat is 18C. That's economy." Karen gasped like she'd just been accused of a crime. "Economy? Do I look like someone who sits in economy?" A ripple of chuckles spread through the line. Even the man in front of me turned his head, biting back a grin. But Karen didn't notice or didn't care. She was too busy trying to stare me down. "You're going to give me that seat," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my boarding pass. "Or I'll make sure this airline hears from my HOA lawyer." That was new. I'd heard of people threatening airlines with bad reviews, angry tweets, even lawsuits. But the HOA lawyer? That was a first. "Ma'am," the gate agent said firmly, "please step aside. You're holding up the line." Karen's face turned crimson. "I will not step aside. That man," she jabbed a finger at me, "is stealing my seat." I could feel the eyes on us now. Dozens of them. Some annoyed, some entertained. Everyone loves a little drama at the airport, as long as they're not the ones in the middle of it. I raised my hands in mock surrender, keeping my tone calm. "Look, I think the scanner decided this one. Why don't we let the staff handle it?" But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. "Handle it?" she barked. "This is a clear case of discrimination. I paid for first class. I deserve first class. And if you think I'm going to squeeze into some cramped seat like them," she waved dismissively at the economy passengers, "you've got another thing coming." The gate agent sighed, signaling for a supervisor. Clearly, this wasn't the first time Karen had caused a scene, and from the way she carried herself, I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last. As the line inched forward, I finally stepped past Karen, boarding pass in hand. But I couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't done with me yet. The glare she burned into the back of my head said it all. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about her pride. And people like Karen never let their pride go quietly. When I finally reached the jet bridge, the air was cooler, quieter. For a moment, I thought maybe the chaos was over. Maybe she'd finally accept her seat in 18C and move on. But when I glanced back, there she was, storming down the jet bridge after me, her voice echoing off the walls. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "You'll regret this." Passengers ahead of me exchanged amused glances. A businessman muttered, "Here we go again," under his breath. A teenager whipped out her phone, already recording. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. After all, I'd handled worse. Much worse. What Karen didn't know, what nobody on that plane knew, was that this wasn't just a regular trip for me. That seat wasn't a luxury. It was part of my job. And while Karen thought she was fighting for comfort, she was about to find herself in the middle of something far bigger than she could ever imagine. But for now, I stayed silent, letting her words echo behind me as I stepped onto the plane. Because sometimes the best way to deal with a storm is to let it build. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you already know the type. Rules on top of rules, fines for breathing too loudly, and board meetings that feel less like community gatherings and more like courtroom trials. Karen wasn't just part of an HOA. She was the HOA. Back in my neighborhood, stories about her floated around like urban legends. Most people only encountered her when they got one of those infamously passive-aggressive notices in their mailbox. Your trash can was visible for exactly 3 minutes after collection day. $50 fine. But Karen? She took it to an art form. She didn't just enforce rules. She invented them. One neighbor, the Thompsons, once planted roses that grew an inch taller than regulation height. Karen was on their doorstep the next morning with a measuring tape and a camera, lecturing them about community aesthetics. When they laughed and closed the door in her face, she marched straight to the board and issued a violation on her own authority. Another time, she fined the Johnson kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Graffiti, she called it. A smiling sun and stick figures, hardly gang tags. But in Karen's world, joy itself was a violation. But the most infamous story was the Christmas lights incident. The Andersons were the kind of family that went all out for the holidays. Lights on every edge of the roof, inflatable reindeer in the yard, a glowing Santa that waved when you walked past. It brought the whole street together. Kids loved it, neighbors loved it. Everyone, except Karen. She filed 3 complaints in 1 week: excessive illumination, light pollution, and, my personal favorite, emotional distress caused by over-cheerfulness. When the board ignored her, she marched into the Andersons' yard at midnight and unplugged their lights herself. That little stunt ended with the cops being called, Karen screaming about trespassing on community property, and the Andersons filing for a restraining order. So when I saw her at the airport, standing there with her HOA tote bag and her trademark scowl, I knew exactly who I was dealing with. This wasn't just a random entitled passenger. This was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of control. And she wasn't about to let something as small as the truth get in the way of her rights. The thing about people like Karen is they never start at full strength. They build their power slowly, one small victory at a time, until everyone's too exhausted to fight them anymore. First, she was just a regular board member. Quiet, unassuming, the kind who offered to help out with community issues. She brought cookies to meetings, nodded sympathetically at neighbors' complaints, and made herself look harmless. Then came the first election. Nobody else wanted the job of HOA president. It was thankless work, filled with paperwork and complaints. So when Karen nominated herself, she ran unopposed. She won by default, and that's when everything changed. She rewrote the bylaws, adding page after page of new restrictions. No grass taller than 2 inches, no cars parked on the street after dark, no Halloween decorations that might frighten sensitive neighbors. She even banned garage sales, claiming they attracted the wrong kind of people. Anyone who resisted found themselves buried in violation notices. And if you tried to fight back, Karen would drag you through hearings, fines, and endless threats of liens on your property. In just 2 years, she'd turned the neighborhood into her own personal kingdom. So when Karen planted herself in front of me at Gate B17, snarling about how her seat had been stolen, I wasn't surprised. This was her natural state, confrontation. She wasn't really fighting for 1A. She was fighting for the same thing she always fought for: control. The same control she'd wielded over lawns and mailboxes, now directed at an airline gate agent and, unfortunately, me. The murmurs from other passengers grew louder as the standoff continued. Some were annoyed, some amused, but one thing was clear. They were all against her. And yet, Karen didn't care. She thrived on conflict the same way she had back home. "Listen here," she snapped at the gate agent. "I sit in first class every time I fly. Do you understand me? Every single time. Now either fix your little computer error, or I'll have you written up. Don't think I don't have connections." The agent raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. But Karen wasn't done. She pointed directly at me again. "And he is not sitting there. I don't care what that scanner says. I'm not moving until this is corrected." It was like déjà vu, watching her pull the same tricks she used in the neighborhood. Intimidation, threats, and a refusal to admit she could be wrong. The only difference was, this time she wasn't dealing with homeowners. She was dealing with federal authority. But that was a card I wasn't ready to play. Not yet. As the confrontation dragged on, more passengers joined the spectacle. Phones came out, cameras pointed, whispers spread. The phrase "typical Karen" drifted through the crowd like wildfire. Karen heard it too. I could see her shoulders stiffen, her face harden. That word, Karen, was her greatest weakness. She'd fought so hard to build herself into a figure of authority, but one mocking label could reduce her to a punchline. And now, an entire boarding gate was laughing at her. That only made her angrier. "You're all going to regret this," she shouted, her voice echoing through the terminal. "I'll have this airline shut down if I have to." It was absurd, but that was Karen. A queen without a kingdom, desperately clinging to her crown. And as I stood there, boarding pass still in hand, I realized something. This wasn't just a funny airport story. This was a powder keg waiting to explode. Because Karen wasn't the type to back down. And neither was I. The boarding line had turned into a standstill. People craned their necks over their carry-ons, trying to see what the holdup was. Phones were out, some discreet, others openly recording. Everyone knew this was about to become that viral airport moment. And at the center of it, Karen was in full swing. "I'm not moving until I get my rightful seat," she shouted, planting herself firmly in front of the boarding gate like she was chaining herself to a tree for protest. "This airline is corrupt. I paid for first class, and I will sit in first class." The gate agent, a young woman with the patience of a saint, tried to keep her voice even. "Ma'am, your boarding pass clearly says 18C. You are assigned to economy. If you'd like, I can check if there are any upgrade options available for purchase." Karen cut her off with a scoff. "Purchase? Purchase? I don't purchase upgrades. I demand them. Do you even know who I am?" I couldn't resist muttering under my breath. "Pretty sure the whole terminal knows who you are by now." That earned a couple of chuckles from nearby passengers. Unfortunately, Karen heard it too. Her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. "You think this is funny?" she barked. "You're stealing from me. That's my seat you're sitting in. And you," she jabbed a finger toward the gate agent again, "you're complicit in theft. Both of you." The gate agent sighed, rubbing her temples. "Sir," she said to me softly, "would you mind just stepping aside while we resolve this?" I gave her a calm nod. "Of course. No problem." But Karen didn't see that as a gesture of patience. She saw it as victory. "That's right," she crowed, loud enough for half the gate to hear. "Step aside and give me what's mine." The people in line weren't buying it. Someone called out, "Lady, sit down already." Another voice chimed in, "You're holding up the whole flight." Karen spun around, her tote bag nearly smacking a kid in the face. "Mind your own business," she snapped. "This is between me, this incompetent airline, and him." Her finger jabbed toward me again like I was a criminal on trial. The supervisor finally arrived. A tall man with years of fatigue etched on his face. He looked like he'd seen this exact scene play out 100 times before. "What seems to be the issue here?" Karen wasted no time launching into her performance. "This man stole my seat. The gate agent refused to fix the mistake. And now I'm being discriminated against in front of the entire airport." The supervisor calmly took both boarding passes, scanning them on his handheld device. Beep, beep, green for mine, red for hers. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "your seat is indeed 18C. This gentleman is assigned 1A. There is no mistake. Karen's jaw dropped. No mistake? No mistake? Look at me. Do I look like someone who belongs in economy? The supervisor raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, seats are not assigned by appearance. That got a burst of laughter from the crowd. Someone clapped. Karen's face turned beet red. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. All of you will regret this. My HOA lawyer will. And there it was again. The HOA lawyer threat. It had become her weapon of choice, wielded like a sword no one else could see. The supervisor stayed calm. Ma'am, you have two choices. Take your assigned seat or forfeit your flight. But we need to continue boarding. Karen stood frozen, trembling with fury. The idea of losing face in front of all these people was clearly unbearable. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd back down. But then, she lunged forward. Before anyone could react, Karen snatched my boarding pass out of my hand, waving it in the air like a trophy. See? Says 1A. This is mine. Gasps rippled through the gate. The teenager recording actually whispered, Oh my God! She stole his ticket. The gate agent moved fast, reclaiming the pass and handing it back to me. Ma'am, that's enough. If you continue this behavior, security will be called. Karen's eyes widened at the word security. She hesitated, but only for a second. Then she leaned in close to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You don't deserve that seat. You don't deserve first class. People like me do. And I'll make sure you regret crossing me. Her breath reeked of stale coffee and peppermint gum. But it wasn't the smell that unsettled me. It was the way she said people like me. Because I knew exactly what that meant. Entitlement, arrogance, control. And people like Karen never stopped at words. The supervisor gestured toward the jet bridge. Sir, you may board now. I nodded, stepping forward. As I did, Karen shrieked again, louder than ever. This isn't over. He doesn't belong in first class. I do. The last thing I saw before turning the corner was Karen being physically blocked by the gate agent. Her face twisted in rage, her voice echoing down the terminal. And though I kept my expression calm, my pulse quickened, because this wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was about to become a war. The jet bridge was just steps away, but the chaos behind me refused to die down. Karen's voice carried like a siren, her words echoing through the gate. I pay good money to be treated with respect, she shrieked. I will not be crammed into coach like some nobody. Passengers were muttering now, some rolling their eyes, others shaking their heads. A man in a business suit leaned against the wall, smirking as he muttered, First-class tantrum. Classic. But Karen wasn't just throwing a tantrum. She was escalating. She shoved her tote bag at the gate agent, demanding they upgrade her immediately or suffer the consequences. The agent, still holding her ground with remarkable patience, leaned closer and lowered her voice, firm enough to cut through the noise. Ma'am, you need to calm down. Right now. You are not assigned a first-class seat. You will not be moved to first class. Your options are to board your assigned seat in economy, or to leave this flight. Karen blinked. For a moment, her mouth opened but no words came out. She wasn't used to pushback. Back in the HOA meetings, her word was law. When she threatened, people folded. When she scowled, neighbors retreated. But this wasn't her HOA kingdom. And the gate agent? She wasn't afraid. The crowd noticed too. A ripple of approval passed through the line. Quiet claps murmured finally. Even a low whistle from someone in the back. That only enraged Karen further. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she spat. I'll have your job for this. I'll have this whole airline shut down. Do you know how many people I know in power? The agent didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled out a phone and spoke into it calmly. Requesting security at gate B17. Passenger refusing to comply with boarding procedures. The murmurs in the crowd turned to full-blown commentary. She's done now, someone whispered. Oh, this is gonna get good. Another chuckled, raising their phone to keep filming. A kid clutched his mom's arm and whispered loudly, "Mom, is that a Karen?" The mom hushed him, but not before half the line laughed. Karen spun around, glaring at the laughing faces, her cheeks burning crimson. "Shut up. All of you. You think this is funny? You'll regret mocking me." I stood a few steps down the jet bridge, watching the scene unfold. My instinct was to stay quiet, stay calm, and let the airline staff handle it. But Karen caught my eye again, and her fury sharpened like a blade. "You," she roared, pointing at me. "This is your fault. If you hadn't stolen my seat, none of this would be happening. Do you enjoy humiliating women? Is that what this is?" The gate agent interjected quickly. "Ma'am, that's enough." But Karen wasn't listening. She was pacing now, ranting about conspiracies, favoritism, discrimination, every sentence louder than the last. And then, she made the mistake that sealed her fate. She lunged forward, trying to push past the gate agent into the jet bridge. "Move!" she screamed. "I'm taking my seat." The agent planted her feet and shoved her palm forward. Not violently, just firm enough to hold the line. "Ma'am, stop. You are not boarding this flight until you comply." The crowd erupted, gasps, cheers, even applause. Someone shouted, "Gate agent for president," and the laughter that followed only made Karen's face twist even tighter. "You'll all pay for this," she screeched, clutching her tote bag like a weapon. "You'll see." Security arrived just then. Two uniformed officers moving through the crowd with practiced calm. The sight of them only added fuel to Karen's fire. "Good," she shouted, pointing wildly. "Arrest him. Arrest this man for stealing my seat." Every eye in the terminal turned toward me. The officers paused, then looked at the gate agent, waiting for confirmation. The agent shook her head firmly. "No, sir has done nothing wrong. The disruptive passenger is this woman." Karen's jaw dropped like she'd been betrayed. "What? You're all in on it, aren't you? This whole airline is corrupt. This is a scam." The officers approached her carefully, their voices calm. "Ma'am, we need you to lower your voice and step aside." Karen clutched her tote bag tighter, glaring at me as if I'd orchestrated this entire conspiracy. "You," she hissed again, "you're going to regret this more than anyone." And in that moment, with half the terminal filming and the other half watching in stunned silence, I realized just how dangerous her rage could become. Because Karen wasn't just entitled. She was relentless. The gate agent turned toward me briefly, her eyes narrowing with a hint of recognition, as if she knew I wasn't just another passenger. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, she looked back at Karen and said the words that silenced the entire crowd. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Either board your assigned seat in economy, or you'll be removed from this flight." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, Karen hesitated. Her lips trembled. Her eyes darted around the room. She was cornered, outnumbered, and losing. But Karen never accepted defeat quietly. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The jet bridge swallowed the noise of the gate the second I stepped onto the aircraft. The cool blast of recycled air hit my face, mingling with the faint scent of jet fuel and disinfectant. The first-class cabin was quiet, almost serene compared to the chaos outside. For a fleeting moment I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. I slipped into seat 1A, my assigned spot, setting my carry-on beneath the seat. The leather was soft, the armrest polished, the window view perfect. But comfort wasn't why I needed this seat. Not really. I leaned back, eyes half closed, when I heard it, the unmistakable clack of high heels. Karen. Her voice carried through the cabin as if she owned the plane. "This is ridiculous. I should be up there. Do you know how humiliating it is to sit back there?" The flight attendant, a petite woman with steel in her posture, intercepted her near the galley. "Ma'am, please take your assigned seat in economy. We need to begin departure." Karen's tone sharpened like a knife. "I don't sit in economy. I never sit in economy. I'm a first-class passenger, always have been, always will be. This airline will regret treating me like this." From my vantage point, I caught the exchange reflected in the shiny galley door. Karen's face was twisted in indignation, her tote bag slung over one arm like a shield. The attendant didn't flinch. "Ma'am, if you do not sit down immediately, the captain will be notified, and you may be removed from this flight entirely." A ripple of gasps and murmurs drifted from the economy cabin. Dozens of eyes peered over headrests, watching the spectacle unfold. Phones were up again, lenses glowing like little spotlights. Karen finally stormed down the aisle, muttering curses under her breath. "This is beneath me. I don't belong here. This seat is an insult." Passengers recoiled as she squeezed into 18C, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes boring into the back of the seat in front of her. Her fury radiated like heat. I almost felt sorry for whoever had to sit next to her. Almost. The flight attendants moved with brisk efficiency, closing overhead bins and performing safety checks. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 472, non-stop to Denver. We'll be pushing back shortly." Karen's scoff was loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Welcome aboard?" Hardly welcoming. The man in 18B sighed heavily. "Lady, can you please just be quiet for 5 minutes?" Karen's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with offense. "Excuse me? You do not tell me to be quiet. Do you even know who I am?" "Yeah," he muttered, turning back to his magazine. "You're the reason we're 40 minutes late." The snickers from nearby passengers made Karen seethe. She sank into her seat, lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes darted forward to me. Even from 18 rows back, I could feel the weight of her glare. We reached cruising altitude, and the hum of engines settled into the background. First-class attendants served drinks and warm towels. I sipped water, feigning relaxation, though my mind was already calculating, observing. Then came the voice. Karen's. Again. "I demand champagne. This is outrageous." The flight attendant leaned over her row, maintaining composure. "Ma'am, complimentary champagne is for first-class passengers. I can offer you soda, juice, or water." Karen's laugh was sharp, cruel. "Do I look like someone who drinks soda? I am a first-class passenger. That man," she jabbed a finger toward the front cabin, "stole my seat." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some rolled their eyes. Others whispered, "Here we go again." The attendant's tone dropped an octave. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Disruptive behavior on board can result in removal upon landing." Karen crossed her arms, muttering loud enough for her row to hear. "Pathetic service. I'll have this airline bankrupt by the end of the month." Her seatmates shifted uncomfortably, leaning away from her as if her entitlement were contagious. I should have tuned her out, should have ignored her antics like everyone else. But for me, 1A wasn't about legroom or luxury. It was about proximity, about necessity. Most passengers saw first class as indulgence. For me, it was duty. The first row gave me clear sight of the cockpit door, unobstructed view of the aisle, and immediate access to intervene if anything went wrong. And in my line of work, things often went wrong. Karen thought this was about comfort. She had no idea that her tantrum had nearly compromised something far bigger than her pride. I adjusted in my seat, eyes narrowing as I scanned the cabin. Years of training kept me vigilant. Faces, behaviors, movements, nothing escaped my notice. But every time I glanced back, there she was, Karen, scowling, muttering, plotting. And deep down I knew she wasn't finished. Dinner service began. Trays clinked, the smell of reheated pasta filled the air, and most passengers settled into their routines. But not Karen. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stormed up the aisle, and planted herself in front of the curtain separating economy from first class. Arms crossed, chin raised, voice sharp enough to slice through engine noise. "I want my seat. Now." The attendant guarding the galley stepped forward. "Ma'am, please return to your seat immediately." Karen's laugh was high-pitched, mocking. "You think you can keep me back there? I deserve to sit here. Everyone knows it. And if you don't let me through, I'll make sure this entire airline collapses under my HOA lawyer's lawsuit. Passengers gasped, some groaned. The man in 2B muttered, "Unbelievable." Karen tried to push past the attendant, her hand on the curtain. That's when the flight leader arrived. Calm, authoritative, unshaken. "Ma'am," she said, voice firm. "Return to your seat or you will be restrained." The cabin fell silent. The words restrained hung heavy in the recycled air. Karen froze. Her eyes darted around, searching for support. But all she found were glares and cameras. And then, because Karen always doubled down, she pointed straight at me. "Him. He doesn't deserve that seat. He's not special. I am. You're protecting the wrong person." The irony was almost laughable. If only she knew the truth. Because this wasn't just about comfort or status. This was about duty. And sooner or later, she was going to find out exactly who she was up against. The seat belt light flickered overhead, the soft chime echoing through the cabin. Most passengers barely noticed. They were dozing, flipping through magazines, or watching tiny screens glow on the backs of headrests. But my mind wasn't on the movie trailers or the dinner trays. It was on the reason I was here. Karen thought my seat was a luxury. She couldn't have been more wrong. For me, seat 1A wasn't about privilege, it was about protocol. 2 nights earlier, my phone had buzzed with the kind of call you never ignore. The message was short, direct, and without explanation. Assignment confirmed. Seat 1A. Maintain cover. Stay vigilant. That was it. No details, no names, no list of who or what to expect. Just orders. And in my world, you don't question orders. You follow them. People assume U.S. Marshals are all about kicking down doors and hunting fugitives. That's part of it. But sometimes our job is quieter, hidden in plain sight. Flying undercover was one of those roles. We sat where we were told, observed what needed to be observed, and acted only when necessary. And seat 1A? That wasn't random. It was strategic. From the very front row, I had the best line of sight. The cockpit door, the entire aisle stretching back like a rifle scope, and the galley where most disturbances started. If something went wrong, a fight, a threat, a hijacking, I was the first line of defense. No luxury champagne. No pampered comfort. Just duty disguised as indulgence. As the memory played in my head, Karen's voice pierced the air again. "This is outrageous. I don't belong back here." Her whining grated against my nerves, but I stayed still, silent. I couldn't afford to break cover. Not yet, because she wasn't just an annoyance. She was a distraction. And distractions in my line of work could get people hurt. I thought back to another flight years earlier. Different plane, different city, but the same tension humming in the recycled air. That time, the disruption hadn't come from a Karen demanding champagne. It had come from a man in row 14 who slipped into the aisle too casually, his hand too close to the overhead bin. By the time anyone realized he wasn't reaching for a jacket but a weapon, I was already on my feet. The fight was short, brutal, over in less than a minute. Passengers screamed. Flight attendants ducked. And when it was done, the man was zip-tied face down in the galley. No one clapped. No one cheered. They just stared, half in fear, half in gratitude, at the stranger who'd saved their flight. That's the job. No credit. No applause. Just order restored. I blinked, pulling myself back into the hum of the current flight. The cabin smelled faintly of reheated pasta and coffee. Passengers whispered about movies and weather. Normalcy. But my instincts told me this wasn't over. Karen was a storm gathering at the back of the plane, and storms had a way of striking when you least expected them. I glanced back down the aisle. She was there, glaring holes through the curtain, arms folded so tight her knuckles were white. Her seatmates leaned away from her, one with headphones cranked up, the other pretending to nap. She wasn't blending in. She wasn't calming down. And in a strange way, her tantrum was more dangerous than a stranger with a weapon, because she was unpredictable, uncontrollable. If something real went wrong, she'd be the first to panic, the first to scream, the first to make everything worse. That's why my seat mattered, not just for what I could see, but for what I could stop. I thought back to the day I took the oath. The words had been simple but heavy. To serve and protect, without hesitation or fear. At the time, I hadn't understood how many forms that protection could take. Sometimes it was handcuffs. Sometimes it was paperwork. And sometimes it was a seat. Seat 1A. The engines hummed steady, but something in my gut twisted. Karen's outburst at the gate, her obsession with control, her refusal to back down. It was more than entitlement. It was fixation. She wasn't just angry about a seat. She needed to prove she was in charge. And people like that, they always push too far. I adjusted in my seat, scanning the cabin again. A mother soothing her baby. A man asleep with his tie loosened. Teenagers giggling over a movie. All normal. But behind that curtain, a ticking time bomb sat in 18C. The flight attendant serving first class leaned down discreetly. "Everything all right up here?" I gave a calm nod, though my eyes didn't leave the aisle. "For now." She hesitated, studying me for a beat longer than necessary. It was the kind of look you give when you suspect someone isn't who they seem. Then, without another word, she moved on. I exhaled slowly, settling back. Karen had no idea she was tangling with more than just an annoyed passenger. And soon enough, the truth would come out. Because while she thought the gate agent had embarrassed her earlier, she hadn't seen anything yet. The real reveal was still coming. And when it did, the entire plane, and Karen most of all, would understand why seat 1A had never, ever been hers to claim. For the first hour of the flight, Karen stayed in her seat. Not quietly, never quietly, but contained. She huffed every time a flight attendant passed. She muttered insults under her breath when her seatmate dared to take the armrest. She refused pretzels because they're stale and demanded champagne twice more. Both times shot down with the same polite firmness. Most passengers tried to tune her out. Headphones on, eyes closed, pretending she wasn't there. But I knew better. Karen wasn't the type to simmer down. She was the type to boil over. And I was right. It started with the curtain. The thin, navy divider between economy and first class. Barely a barrier, more symbolic than anything. Karen had been staring at it like a wolf locked out of a house, waiting for her moment. When the flight attendants disappeared into the galley, she struck. The curtain snapped aside as Karen stormed through, chin lifted, tote bag swinging. "I've had enough," she declared, her voice cutting through the cabin like a fire alarm. "This is my rightful seat, and I'm taking it back." Gasps echoed. Heads whipped around. A businessman in row 2 muttered, "Oh, for God's sake." I sat still in 1A, calm on the outside, though my hand drifted toward the armrest. Ready. A flight attendant rushed forward, blocking her path. "Ma'am, you cannot be here. Please return to your seat immediately." Karen's laugh was sharp, unhinged. "Return to my seat? You mean that sardine can in the back?" "Absolutely not. Do you know how insulting it is to stuff me in economy while he—" She pointed at me like an accusation. "Steals the space I paid for?" Every eye turned to me. Passengers in first class shifted uncomfortably, half expecting me to stand, half waiting for the show. The attendant's voice hardened. "Ma'am, if you do not sit down, you will be restrained for the safety of this flight." That word again. Restrained. It made the cabin shiver. Karen's face twisted in fury. "You wouldn't dare," she shrieked. "I'll have this entire airline shut down. My HOA lawyer will bury you." The attendant didn't flinch. "Ma'am, sit down." Karen's gaze locked on me again, her voice lowering to a hiss. "You don't deserve that seat. You don't deserve first class. People like me do." I finally spoke, my voice calm but carrying across the cabin. "Ma'am, I didn't take your seat. The computer doesn't lie." She barked a laugh. "The computer? Please, do you know how easy it is to manipulate those systems? This is a conspiracy. Against me." Passengers groaned. A teenager whispered, "This is better than Netflix." Karen stomped closer, only a few feet away now. Her tote bag bumped against seats, nearly smacking a woman in the face. She jabbed her finger toward me again. "Get out." The tension in the air snapped taut. For a moment, it felt like she might actually lunge at me, try to drag me out by force. And if she did, she'd regret it. But before I had to move, the flight leader stepped in. Tall, unshaken, voice steady as steel. "Ma'am, return to your seat right now, or this flight will make an emergency landing and you will be escorted off in handcuffs." The cabin went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the engines, the clink of a glass in the galley, even the faint squeak of Karen's heels shifting against the floor. For the first time, she looked uncertain. But only for a second. She spun, pointing wildly at the rows of passengers filming her. "You're all against me, every last one of you, but I will not be humiliated by this airline, by this man, or by anyone." And then, she grabbed the curtain, yanking it down with a violent pull. The rod clattered against the floor, the fabric pooling like a collapsed stage backdrop. Gasps erupted. A baby cried. Someone shouted, "She's lost it!" The flight attendants surged forward, two of them trying to block her from advancing further. She flailed, shouting, "Get your hands off me! I'm not an animal!" Her tote bag swung wide and knocked over a tray of empty glasses. Shards scattered across the floor, skittering dangerously underfoot. The flight leader's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough! Restrain her!" Passengers cheered. Someone clapped. The teenager filming whispered, "Oh my God! This is going viral." Two attendants grabbed her arms, but Karen kicked, screamed, cursed. "You can't do this to me. I'm first class. I deserve first class." And then, she screamed the words that sealed her fate. "This man is a fraud. He's not supposed to be here. I am." Her finger was back on me, eyes blazing with hatred. "He doesn't belong. He's the reason this flight is unsafe." The irony nearly made me laugh, but I stayed calm, watching as the attendants wrestled her toward the back. She thrashed, her voice echoing down the aisle. "I'll sue all of you. This isn't over." The curtain was gone, the order of the cabin shattered. The piece of first class was broken beyond repair. And yet, in her chaos, Karen had set the stage perfectly. Because soon, very soon, the truth about who really belonged in seat 1A would come out. And it wouldn't just silence Karen. It would shock everyone on board. Karen's screams still echoed in my ears, even as the flight attendants dragged her down the aisle. Her voice cracked with rage, spitting words like venom. "You'll regret this. I'll have you all fired. This flight is a disgrace." Most passengers had gone from anger to outright amusement. Phones were still recording, but now laughter mixed with the gasps. It was chaos, but controlled chaos. Karen was outnumbered, restrained, and finally silenced. And yet, as I sat back in seat 1A, watching the attendants secure her in the rear, I knew the truth. This wasn't the climax. This was just the setup. The real twist that had already been set in motion back at the gate. The memory replayed vividly, as if my mind was cutting between two films. 1. Karen shrieking about her first-class seat. 2. The moment before boarding, when the gate agent's voice sliced through the terminal with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, please step aside," she had announced. "Escort the pilot." The crowd had stirred, passengers shifting to clear a path. Some craned their necks, expecting to see a captain in crisp uniform, epaulets gleaming, cap tucked under his arm. But the person who walked forward was me. Not in a uniform, not with a cap. Just me, civilian clothes, calm stride, boarding pass in hand. Karen had scoffed at the time. "Him? He's no pilot. Look at him. Just some guy with a lucky upgrade." She couldn't have been more wrong. Because while I wasn't the one flying the plane, I was the one protecting it. And for that, the first-class seat wasn't optional, it was essential. When the gate agent had made that announcement, a few passengers had clapped. Most ignored it. Karen had rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. But that phrase, "escort the pilot," wasn't just ceremonial. It was coded, a signal. It told staff that this wasn't just another passenger. It told them I had authority, jurisdiction, and a duty to act if needed. In my line of work, anonymity is protection. That day, though, Anonymity had been shattered, thanks to Karen's endless tantrum. Karen had seen me as the enemy from the start. To her, I was just another nobody standing in the way of what she thought she deserved. She couldn't see the truth. Couldn't imagine that the quiet man in seat 1A was more than a passenger. That I wasn't sipping champagne for leisure. I was watching, waiting, ready. And while she thought her fight was about entitlement, her outburst had accidentally set the stage for something far larger. Because the moment she pointed at me and screamed, "He doesn't belong here," she was right in the strangest possible way. I didn't belong in first class for luxury. I belonged there for duty. The attendants' voices broke me from the memory. "Ma'am, you need to stay seated," one snapped, trying to pin Karen into her seatbelt as she flailed. "I'm not a prisoner," she shrieked. "You can't restrain me like some criminal." The irony wasn't lost on me. Criminals, restrained on flights, was something I knew more about than she could ever imagine. And soon, the passengers were going to find out exactly why. The plane steadied. The aisle lights dimmed. Most of the cabin buzzed with quiet gossip. "Did you hear her? She actually ripped down the curtain. HOA Karen strikes again. She picked the wrong guy to mess with." I sipped my water slowly, letting the whispers swirl. Karen thought she was the center of the story. She had no idea she was just the opening act. Because when the final reveal came, she wouldn't just lose her first-class claim. She'd lose every ounce of power she thought she had. And the passengers? They'd remember this flight for the rest of their lives. The gate agent's words echoed in my head again, crisp and commanding. "Escort the pilot." Karen had laughed then. The crowd hadn't cared. But now, after everything she'd done, those 3 words were about to take on a whole new meaning. Because soon, when the truth came out, it wouldn't just be the gate agent reminding everyone. It would be me. The hum of the engines was steady now, a low thunder that filled the silence Karen had left in her wake. First class had regained a thin veil of calm, but it was fragile, like glass waiting to shatter again at the slightest touch. And then, it happened. Karen, pinned in the back row, raised her voice one final time. "This is a violation of my rights. You can't treat me this way. I belong in first class." "Not him." Dozens of eyes turned toward me again. Her finger jabbed through the air, a spotlight of accusation. The flight leader's jaw tightened. The attendants looked exhausted. The passengers groaned. And I knew the time for cover was over. I stood, not abruptly, not aggressively, just enough to command attention. Every head turned. Even Karen, mid-rant, froze as if her fury had hit a wall. I reached slowly into my jacket pocket. Some passengers tensed, unsure of what I was doing. But when the badge came out, the cabin air shifted. The golden emblem caught the cabin light, shining in sharp relief against the dark leather wallet. "United States Marshal Service," I said, my voice calm, carrying to every corner of the cabin. Gasps rippled through the passengers. The businessman in row 2 muttered, "Holy hell." The teenager recording whispered, "No way." Karen's face drained of color. Her jaw opened, but no words came out. I held her gaze. "Ma'am, the reason you don't have seat 1A is because it's not just a first-class seat. It's a position of duty. I'm here under federal assignment to protect this flight and everyone on it. That seat was never yours to claim." The silence that followed was electric. Her tote bag slipped from her arm, thudding onto the floor. She blinked rapidly, trying to recover, to claw back even a shred of authority. This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You're lying. That's a fake badge. You're just pretending to be someone important." But her words faltered as the flight leader nodded toward me with absolute certainty. "He's exactly who he says he is." The cabin erupted in murmurs, whispers shooting down the aisle like wildfire. "Holy crap, he's a marshal. No wonder she didn't get the seat. She picked the worst possible fight." Karen shrank back against her seat, her voice cracking. I didn't know." I kept my tone even, steady, not cruel, not mocking. "That's the point, ma'am. You didn't know. And you didn't care. You believed you were entitled, no matter the cost, no matter who you trampled over. But this isn't about you. This is about safety. About responsibility. Karen tried again, her words trembling. I didn't mean. But no one was listening anymore. Her power, her audience, her entire facade had crumbled in an instant. For the first time all flight, Karen had nothing to say. Applause started in row 3. It spread slowly at first, then louder, until the cabin filled with claps and cheers. A man in the back shouted, "Finally, some justice." The teenager with the phone whispered, "This video's gonna blow up." And me? I just sat back down, sliding the badge back into my pocket. Calm, composed, exactly as I was trained to be. Karen slumped in her seat, eyes down, lips pressed tight. She looked smaller somehow, like the walls of entitlement had finally caved in on her. The attendants left her there, restrained by nothing more than humiliation. She didn't scream again. She didn't argue. She didn't even look up. And for the rest of the flight, the only sound from 18C was silence. The cabin never really returned to normal. Not in the usual way, at least. Dinner trays rattled and movies flickered. But beneath it all was a hum of energy. Passengers whispering, sneaking glances at me, nudging each other with the quiet thrill of knowing they just witnessed something extraordinary. Karen, meanwhile, sat frozen in 18C, silent, defeated. Her arms crossed so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes locked on the seat back in front of her as though she could will herself invisible. It was the first time I'd seen her quiet, and I knew it wasn't calm. It was shame. Hours later, as the plane descended, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." Most passengers were ready to get off, eager to tell their friends or post their recordings online. But Karen? She sat rigid, her fury simmering behind clenched teeth. When the wheels touched down, applause broke out. The old tradition passengers sometimes do, but this time it wasn't for the landing. It was for the peace, the relief, the fact that the storm had finally passed. The attendants opened the doors, and passengers began filing out. Some paused by my seat, nodding, whispering thank you under their breath. Others offered a smile or a pat on the shoulder. But Karen, she didn't move. "Ma'am," an attendant said gently, "please gather your belongings." Karen's jaw trembled. "This is humiliating," she whispered. "You've all humiliated me." The flight leader didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this could have gone differently. You made choices. Now you'll deal with the consequences." 2 airport security officers boarded, waiting just outside the cabin door. Their presence wasn't dramatic, not forceful, just steady, final. Karen finally rose, clutching her tote bag like a lifeline. Her sunglasses, ridiculous indoors, slid down her nose, revealing eyes red with frustration. As she shuffled off the plane, silence followed her. No one jeered, no one mocked. They just watched. And that, I knew, was worse for her than laughter. Back at the gate, passengers dispersed into the terminal, phones buzzing as they uploaded videos, shared stories, texted friends. Karen, flanked by security, was led away, still muttering about lawsuits and injustice. But quieter now. "Hollow." The gate agent from earlier spotted me as I stepped off. She gave me a knowing look, a small nod of respect. "Thank you," she said softly. I returned the nod. No words needed. Walking through the terminal, I thought about the irony. Karen had fought harder for that seat than I'd ever seen someone fight for anything. She'd screamed, threatened, humiliated herself, all for the illusion of power, the symbol of first class. And yet, the real power in that seat had nothing to do with champagne or leather cushions. It had everything to do with responsibility, with duty, with being ready to protect, not to be pampered. Karen wanted control. What she didn't understand was that real control comes from discipline, from service, from earning respect, not demanding it. At the end of the day, seat 1A wasn't hers because she never understood what it stood for. It wasn't a prize. It was a post. And as she disappeared into the crowd with security at her side, I knew she would never grasp that truth. But everyone else on that flight, they saw it, they felt it, and maybe, just maybe, they walked away with a new understanding of the difference between entitlement and duty, because respect isn't claimed, it's earned. And that, in the end, was the lesson Karen learned the hard way.